Hello and welcome to the Sounds a Bit Woo-Woo to Me podcast. Each week we'll take a deep dive look into an alternative therapy, spiritual practice, or a holistic wellbeing approach that might raise a skeptical eyebrow, be slightly misunderstood, and for some be considered a bit woo-woo. Here's this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name is Becky Taylor. Before we get going today, I wanted to let you know that not only do I offer my public-facing yoga classes, I also work with companies offering corporate yoga sessions. So if this is something that you are interested in for your workplace, you can head to beckytayloryoga.co.uk, click on the corporate yoga tab to send me a note, and I would love to help. So back to the podcast. This week, I'm joined by a man described as Britain's leading crystal expert by the Daily Mail. And Spirit and Destiny magazine have cited him as one of the world's leading authorities in this field. It is, of course, Philip Permutt, and I am so excited to have him on the podcast to talk about all things crystal healing. So here he is. So Philip, welcome to the podcast. I am super excited to chat with you today about all things crystals. I know you're a busy man. You run your shop, you run the website, you have lots of courses and classes, and have written many books. And you're also a firm favourite with the UK media to talk about crystals. So I really do appreciate your time. With your help today, I'd love to dive into crystals and crystal healing therapy. So I guess let's kick off with your story and how you came to discover crystals and began the incredible career that you've had.
Years ago, I suffered from Crohn's disease, which I don't have anymore. And I was in hospital having a bowel resection, and just before the operation, the surgeon came to me and he said, basically, we've got a problem because my sciatic nerve was stuck to the gut in many places and it was kept firing and causing pain. And he said his problem was that he couldn't necessarily separate every bit of nerve from all of the gut because it was all very messed up. And he said that there would be two options, basically, if he couldn't. He would try to, but if he couldn't, he could either remove the whole gut and I would have a colostomy bag, or he could sever the sciatic nerve and I wouldn't be able to walk. But at that time, I didn't want a colostomy bag. And so it was agreed that if he couldn't separate it, he'd sever the nerve. And the next morning he came round and said, basically, the operation was a great success, sorry you can't walk. And at that point in time, I really got into alternative therapies. Up to then, I'd always been really interested in them and interested in everything sort of psychic, spiritual, alternative, but I hadn't actually needed it for me, really. So it was more, okay, what do I do? How does this stuff work? Does it really work? Let's try it, because I'm going to try anything. And I started off having a whole load of different treatments from anyone who would come give me a treatment in the hospital, because I was still in hospital. And I had crystal healing and Reiki and probably everything most people have heard of and some things people haven't heard of. And I'm sure they all helped in different ways. But the short bit of the story is 6 weeks and 2 days later, I walked out of the hospital without any sticks or crutches or anything, to the amazement of the nurses, actually. So, yeah, that was it. And then I was actually very ill at the time. So I spent a year convalescing. And because my background was in science, because I did a degree in applied biology, and my brain basically was still working very scientifically then. And crystals you can hold and you can do things and you can test them and everything else. And you can't do that with the sort of energy healing stuff where you've just got energy floating around. So it's not that the energy healing didn't work. I'm sure it did, and everything contributed towards the healing process. But the crystals are those solid things, and that's why I ended up with crystals as my main thing. And I love them, and they're so wonderful and magnificent and amazingly powerful.
What an incredible story, from being told that you couldn't walk to, walking out the hospital six weeks later, having tried these other therapies, not just the prescribed, medicinal route. That's incredible. And at the time, were crystals a big thing?
No, I believe I was the 6th person in the UK in modern times to actually work with crystals as a crystal healer. At that time, they were actually really difficult to get hold of. There were some very dusty mineral collectors shops, and there were a few sort of very mystical shops dotted around the place, which do sort of put people off going in through the door in the first place.
So how far back does crystal usage go? Obviously, it wasn't very popular back then, but how long have humans been using crystals for therapy? When did it kind of start? What's the time frame?
Since we've been humans.
Okay.
There are some caves in South Africa at Maritzburg, and it's called the Cradle of Humanity, the Cradle of Humankind, because they're the oldest fossils there of anything relating to a standing up on two legs ape, basically, that we descended from. And there's I believe it's about 3 million years, the caves were actually used as homes by our ancestors. And in the layers going down even to 3.5 million years ago, they have found crystal tools and crystals which have been brought there from other places. So they may not be able to say exactly what they used them for, how they used them, whatever else, but we've been working with crystals since we've been standing on our back legs, basically.
Wow, okay. So long. Bringing it up to date to now, if somebody is listening to this and is a absolute total newbie to crystals, doesn't know anything about it, but is kind of curious, let's go back to basics. What exactly constitutes a crystal? What is it? And in sort of layman terms, how can they help us?
Okay, I've got a very broad use of the word crystal. And whenever I use the word crystal, I'm including the whole mineral kingdom. So I'm including rocks and stones and mountains and the big sort of monoliths at Stonehenge and a pebble you pick up on the beach. Everything is included in it. And that's because all of them basically are, or they contain, or they're made up of different crystalline forms. There are a few exceptions to that. There are some rocks that aren't crystalline, but the vast majority of them are. Not all of them form perfect crystals, though. And a perfect crystal forms in one of 7 shapes. And that has a perfect crystal structure. So it has a perfect structure repeated in it over and over and over again, which is how it grows and it becomes a crystal. Everything else might have lots and lots of tiny ones of those making up one big rock. So I'm including everything in it. And how they work, basically, they change you on an energetic level. The thing about crystals is they are so easy to work with. And if you just think that the one thing they're doing for you the whole time is they're balancing your energy. So if you've got a bunch of crystals and you need some, you don't need others, you don't know what, just have them all, because the ones that you don't need are just going to sit there and look pretty, and the ones you do need are going to help you. And they literally, balance is the key word to it. They're always balancing. So, for example, if you've got a crystal that's going to help a weight thing, then it doesn't mean to say that crystal will help everyone lose weight. The crystal will help everyone get to the weight that they should be, the perfect weight for them as an individual. So if you think, I want to be a size 0 model, it's not going to happen unless physically you're supposed to be that.
But we can never then pick the wrong crystal. Is there ever any negative effects if you do have the wrong crystal, in your house?
Not at all. If you have the wrong crystal, then it just literally is sitting there looking pretty, and that's it. If you have the right crystal, it doesn't always mean to say you like it, though. And lots of people talk about things like if you're drawn to a crystal, if you notice a crystal, if it's waving at you, if it makes you smile, then it's a crystal you need. And that's absolutely true. But I also want people to be really aware of the crystals they don't like, the ones that they go over to in a shop and they can't even touch, the ones that they look at and they just feel nauseous about. And those are the ones which are touching something really deep down inside that you don't actually want to look at. And those are the ones that will change your life and make you really better.
Because it's something perhaps that you need to work through.
Yeah, it's all those things that everyone has them, that something comes up and you push it down and you just get on with life. And it's those things that you've pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. Those are the things that those crystals are going to bring up.
And how do we know the properties of what certain crystals can do? Is it uniform, or does it depend on the person using said crystal and their intention? Or is there just a blanket set of rules generally, X crystal does Y thing?
Essentially, I believe that every single crystal does only one thing. But because it does the one thing, it affects a whole load of things. And so you get different authors saying that the same crystal does many, many different things. For example, citrine. Citrine, the one thing it does is it works on the cells in the gut that absorb nutrients. And that's it. Doesn't do anything else. And it balances them, because it's always the balance is the key word. But by doing that, it means that you're getting more nutrients that you actually need into your body from whatever amount of food you're eating. So that means you've got more nutrients going around your blood system, being carried around the body. And so citrine's good for any type of body repair, any physical repair, from a bruise on your arm to recovering from major surgery. Citrine will just help it heal quicker. Because citrine does that, because you've got more nutrients going around your body and they're all being carried around in your blood, so your heart doesn't have to beat as hard to get nutrients to where they're needed. So it's good for your heart. It's good for your circulation. Because it's good for your heart and you've got that circulation going better, you're getting more oxygen basically coming in, going around your body and going up to your brain. Because you've got more oxygen going to your brain, it's good for any sort of logical thought, working out problems, working out things, but it's also good for the whole creative side in your brain. So it's good for creativity, it's good for music, art, writing, anything at all, design, abstract thought, because you've got more nutrients going around in your body, and it goes on and on and on. So one person might say, citrine's really good for the tummy, the gut, digestion, and everything to do with it, which it is. But someone else might also say, it's good for creativity, which it is, because it helps that. And so many crystals can help so many things.
So there's a bit of a chain link kind of knock-on effect to each crystal. That's interesting. I read somewhere that when you are buying crystals, you need to cleanse them because they might have absorbed other people's energy, anybody else that's handling them. If I were to go out and get some crystals now, how would I go about cleansing them?
For most crystals, the easiest way to cleanse them is running water. There are a few crystals which are water soluble, so that's not advisable to put them in water because you won't have them. They'll disappear. And there are a few crystals that you shouldn't put in water for other reasons, such as there's something called celicite, which is a lovely blue crystal. And the crystal's fine in water, but they tend to come in a sandy matrix. And if you put that in water, you might wash away the sandy matrix. You won't damage the crystals, but you'll have a handful of tiny crystals instead of one piece, basically. So it's things like that you have to think about.
Mm-hmm. And once we've got the crystal, it's been cleansed, and we might put it in our home, we might put it next to our bed. Is that enough, or do we need to wear it? Do we need to handle it every day? How should we be interacting with them?
As a general rule, if you are holding a crystal, it will work better. If you're wearing a crystal or carrying it with you 24/7, it will work better still.
And when you're selecting your crystal, when I've looked online, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. The bigger the problem, is it necessarily the case that the bigger the crystal needs to be, or is that simply not true?
General rule, if you're just working with yourself and you're going to hold the crystal yourself, then the size really doesn't matter. If you're working with other people, if you're working in spaces or rooms and you want to change the whole room, you want to change how a whole office feels or something like that, or a whole building, then yes, size does matter.
Okay. So what are your favourite go-to crystals then? Tell us about some that you just love and you return to time and time again.
Citrine has stayed with me continuously since the very first day I worked with crystals on myself in the hospital. Tourmaline's another crystal that I love. Tourmaline is really protective for your energy. And when you do lots of work with people, especially energy work and healing work, then your energy gets mixed with theirs in the process, and it's to separate it is a really, really good thing. Otherwise, you end up suffering their pains, their discomfort, their emotions, which get attached to you. So something like tourmaline is really, really good for that. But also for anyone on an everyday basis, we pick up energy just walking around the place, going into the supermarket, walking down the high street, whatever you're doing. You're picking up energy from people all around you all the time. You've got the friend who pops over for a cup of tea. That's sort of a classic one, isn't it? And they dump all of their worries on you, and then they feel absolutely great, and you're exhausted. And tourmaline's really good because it can let you still be there for them and help your friend, but without actually taking on their stuff.
Without absorbing it, yeah. A lot of people at the moment are quite anxious about money and their careers, what with COVID-19 and, imminent end of furlough and redundancies. For somebody in that headspace that is worried about making ends meet or money or these kind of financial and career worries, is there a stone that you would a crystal, that you would recommend?
Yes, there are a couple. One, citrine again, because citrine brings abundance, and it's really quite incredible. And the other one is pyrite, which also brings abundance. And the two of them together can really make a difference. If you've got your own business, then put citrine in wherever your till is. I use that word very, very broadly because, if you're taking money over the internet, then it might be sort of next to your computer rather than actually in a till or whatever. But yeah, wherever you take your money from, keep a citrine crystal there. Or the other thing is keep one in your purse or wallet. There's an amazing thing when you get to bigger things and needing to sell them or wanting to sell them, things like houses. And there's an amazing thing with selling houses that works every single time. And that's to put a small citrine crystal in every single room in the house, and one big one, either when you come into the house or in the main room of the house. So it could be in the middle of the dining table or something like that. And that sells houses phenomenally well. The fastest that it's worked was a lady who inherited a house from her mother a couple of years earlier, and it had been with an agent down in Bournemouth, actually. And it hadn't sold and hadn't had a lot of interest. And so she appointed a new agent and went down there to meet him. And she took the citrine crystals, put them literally in every single room in the house, and put one big citrine crystal in the hallway as you came in. And she was coming home, and she was driving back to St Albans, and she stopped at Fleet Services on the way, and her agent phoned her and said he had an offer for the asking price.
No way! Wow. I am jotting this down because I am trying to sell my place at the moment with not much luck.
Okay, small citrine crystal in each room.
Okay.
Literally every room. So the downstairs loo, everywhere, everything that's a room. And one really nice piece. What I always advise people is the really nice piece, if you want to take that with you when you move, great. Just leave the other small crystals there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess another question, let's do another quick topical one. There are going to be a lot of lockdown babies coming up next year. We're going to have a baby boom. A lot of people are pregnant, myself included. So I'm quite interested in this as well. What crystals are good for childbirth and labour and just ensuring kind of a safe passage through to motherhood? Is there a go-to stone in that instance?
Yeah, the first one, very, very first one's got to be chrysocolla. So chrysocolla, the one thing about it is that it helps both the mother and the developing babies. So all of the others tend to do one or the other, but chrysocolla does both. So I really think that that's a starting point. Other things which are helpful are moonstone, rose quartz, things that make you feel nice. And any crystal that you see that you feel drawn to is a really, really good place to add to that as well.
Okay. Are there any crystals that are native to us here in the UK?
Oh, yes, we've got some interesting things. So there's fluorite in Derbyshire, which is, some of it's actually world famous and renowned for being some of the best in the world. It's called Blue John, and it's got some amazing patterns in it, and is used to create ornaments mostly. but it's also really good for healing. And fluorite's good for bones, it's good for teeth as well, but it's also really, really good to help focus your mind. So if you've sort of got a scatty mind, or you're trying to do too many things and you can't focus on it, really helps you with that. It's also really good for kids at school, actually, for doing exams and tests, anything like that.
We're almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you one other question, because I read about this and I found it quite interesting, and I can almost kind of predict what your answer might be, but I do want to ask you. So I read that you can get some man-made crystals, but logic for me would suggest that they're just not as good, that they just don't work because they've not been created in the earth, of the earth. What's your opinion?
Absolutely, yes, I agree with you. Basically, when you think about it, crystals, natural crystals, are millions of years, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of years old. The oldest ones on the planet are about 4 billion years old, which are zircon crystals, which come from Australia. I've got some zircon crystals which are about 2 billion years old. You know, you can't learn what that crystal has learned and what it's experienced in an hour or a week or a month or however long it takes to grow them in a lab. So growing your own crystals, man-made crystals, if you like, there's a difference between the two, really. You can grow your own crystals because there are some crystals that can, with a little bit of enhancement, grow very, very quickly. So aragonite crystals, which grow in, they form a lot of the stalactites and stalagmites in caves, and they can actually be enhanced with a little bit of vinegar to grow in weeks rather than millions of years. And so that's quite a good one for kids if they want to grow their own crystals. But those crystals aren't going to have the same knowledge and wisdom and healing ability as crystals which have grown naturally over millions of years, even though they're the same type of crystal.
So more like a science project, really.
Yeah. There are a few crystals which are, if you like, man-made or enhanced, which are really wonderful, though. And those are the aura crystals, and especially aqua aura, because they're basically bonding rare metals with quartz crystal. And quartz will amplify any type of energy at all. So it's a way of being able to work with things like gold and platinum and iridium and those sorts of materials, which would probably be prohibitively expensive for most people.
Philip, I just loved speaking to you. I have a ton more questions. You're so knowledgeable, and it's really lovely just to get some kind of firm answers and some insight from you and everything that you've learned. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Let me just mention one thing, which is my latest project is my children's books. I'm writing a children's crystal book with my partner, Nikki Roscoe, and that is coming out on the 19th of March. It's called My Crystal Guide.
And where can people find you online if they want to maybe buy some crystals or follow you on socials?
On social media, Philip Permutt, also on my website, which is www.thecrystalhealer.co.uk.
Thank you, Philip. It's been a pleasure.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, what an interesting chat. I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely going to go look up some of those crystals that Philip mentioned and explore a bit further. Thank you for listening. And if you've enjoyed this podcast and you'd like to hear more from me, you can sign up to my newsletter, which is at beckytayloryoga.co.uk. Until next time, namaste.